things. So let me introduce myself first of all. Can you all see my screen, which I'm sharing there now? Everyone see that?
Yes.
Good, good. So if you wouldn't mind muting yourselves, you know, for the next sort of 30 minutes or so, I'll tell you now how this is going to work. So first of all, introduce you to my colleague Valentina. With the two of us, we'll share with you for about 10, 12 minutes each our views on this subject here. So thriving in the new normal. And how artificial intelligence is reshaping the business world. That's what we want to talk to you about. So we will present, and then we will open it up for not just questions, but for a discussion. So you will then be unmuted, you'll be on video if you choose to be, and you'll have that opportunity to talk to us both about subjects that we've just discussed and other subjects, maybe your current challenges in the face of technological change or change related to the pandemic and so on. So first of all, myself, I'm Katie King. I'm based in London, just outside London in Tunbridge Wells, but I'm in London most of the time for work. If I'm not jumping on a plane, which I miss so much, and going around the world, meeting incredible business people and talking to them through keynote speeches, through training, and through consultancy about my work. So I'm 53, I've been doing this for 30 years. But I keep putting myself out of my comfort zone, and that comfort zone with digital was very, very comfortable, and everyone had caught up, and I no longer had the edge over people, and everyone was half my age, and it was time to change and grow. So I went away, I spent about 4 years, but I spent a year researching a book, and this was published, the book you can see there was published a year ago by Kogan Page, who are specialists in business books. It's been extremely well received because it's not preaching. It's a book of case studies of successes and failures. It's from all over the world, all different industry sectors. So that's really helped open doors to the final bullet point there, which is an all-party parliamentary group where I'm on a task force for enterprise adoption of AI. So I get to go around the world, talk to ministries like the Ministry for AI in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, talking to small companies, to technology disruptors, and working with partners like Simon mentioned there with New Leaf on the actual implementation of these technologies, but through consultancy with people like Valentina, partnerships where we're helping companies get to grips with this kind of technology. So my day job is I have a business called Zudicas, which is PR, social media, content marketing, but the main one really is AI in business. And through that vehicle, I'm doing the kind of work which I just outlined to you. But I think my first comment really would be, and that's why it's good to have lots of you on these kinds of sessions, all of us need to be on a journey of continuous learning, because without that, we become stale and the world is moving so fast. So I'll talk to you more about that in my session in a few moments. But first up, I have Valentina, and she is currently president of the European Union of the Lubricant Industry. So we're talking there major brands like Shell and smaller operators globally in the oil and lubricant space. She is passionate and energetic about making a difference to business and to society, and that's based on a over 20-year career, technically, commercially, and strategically across marketing and business growth and so on. So I'm going to hand over to, I'll stop sharing my screen and hand over to Valentina now, who will talk you through really just her key points, really. So let's admit a few more people into the room. So over to you, Valentina.
Thank you. Sorry, can you all see my screen?
We can see that well. Yes, very good.
Very good.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Katie, for this introduction. And I have to say I'm very happy to be doing this today together with Katie. Katie will go very much in depth about how digitalization and technology can help winning, what I call winning in the new normal. So my perspective will be more about a high-level overview of the path towards, as I said, winning in the new normal. So if we look at McKinsey highlighted 5 stages in the journey towards the new normal, being resolve, resilience, return, reimagination, and reform. While there are undoubtedly differences between the different geographies, we can more or less say that resolve and resilience are more or less behind us. Now, as countries are exiting lockdown and companies are returning to operations, it is really about building long-term plans to recover revenue and to rebuild operations in the new environment, which will be different in terms of customer preferences, different in terms of behaviors, of a competitor scenario, as well as market dynamics. If we take the first element of this, returning to business, here really the imperative is recover revenue. But it will not be enough to just recover revenue. Speed will really be essential. The winners will be those who will be able to recover revenue fast. There are 2 elements to that. One is maximizing revenue from existing sources, and the other is identifying new revenue streams. If we look at the maximizing revenue from existing sources, here I would say that it is really a lot about the work that you have done before. Meaning that if you have mapped well your competitor environment, your position versus your competitors, if you have mapped well your end markets, then you will be able to match your strengths with the new business environment and quickly identify those focus areas that are likely to provide most revenue right now. To give an idea about the different sectors, for instance, yes, of course, this crisis has impacted the economy, but the impact has not been the same across all the sectors. It has impacted very severely tourism, transportation, but for instance, the food chain has grown in spite of the pandemic. Another industry, well, we all see how much we have used Netflix and all these digital platforms. So it is really not the same across all the sectors. And that is why it's important to identify where, based on the new business environment, we can win. Once we have identified what should be our focus areas, then it's really important, as I said again, to be fast, to put in place action plans that can be creating special campaigns, that can be looking at your prices, looking at your promotions, looking at payment terms, looking at everything you can do to grow in those sectors where you are most likely to grow. And in that way, you also focus your efforts on the winners. So, because even if you invent a fantastic campaign, if a sector is down, yes, you may be able to get some traction there, but you should really focus on the sectors where there is most demand. Another thing that you could consider is, for instance, creating special customer experiences based on health and safety, which is on the top of everybody's mind. An example, for instance, is Fiat. Fiat was the first car manufacturer that launched a special pack called the Defense Pack, and it includes a filter that filters allergens, but also bacteria. It includes a UV lamp to sanitize the interior of the car. And interestingly enough, they have not put this pack on every car, but they have put this pack on the small cars, because they believe that in a moment of crisis, people are most likely to buy a small car rather than a larger car. So it's also about thinking about consumer behaviors. Another example is, for instance, Tesla. Tesla has offered a touchless pickup service. So you get to download a code from the Tesla app that you use to open a locker, and then you pick up the car in a parking place. And this is also something that, that one can think about, and that is, Tesla has always been quite forward in terms of how to use digitalization, digital tools, incorporate them in their business model. And that is something that really more companies should do right now. Let's say that digital channels have always been or have been very common for B2C for a number of years now. But there has been recently an acceleration in B2B as well. And this acceleration has really increased drastically during this COVID pandemic. Interestingly enough, recently McKinsey has conducted a survey across 11 countries in 7 sectors and 14 different categories of spend, and in B2B companies, and a vast majority of buyers has expressed a strong preference towards self-service when making a purchase along every stage of the customer decision journey. And mobile apps have grown in importance by more than double since 2019. So digitalization is really entering with force even in B2B. And that is why I think that what Kate is going to develop in the next part of this session will be very valuable, not only for B2C and service companies, but also for B2B and the manufacturing sector. As we said, one aspect was maximizing revenues from existing sources. Unfortunately, this will not be enough, because revenues are bound to decline because of the overall economic crisis. Hence, it will be important also to identify new revenue streams. And here there are some reflections, because it is very important to find new revenue streams that are close to where you are already operating, whether it is something, a new offering to a market where you're already operating, or whether it is leveraging on your existing technology and existing assets. Why is that so important? And also another aspect that is very important to take into account is credentials. Does your plant already have credentials for expanding into another sector and into another production line? Why is it so important to go close to where you are operating? Because, again, that would ensure speed. Because if you go in a sector that your staff is familiar with, that your assets are more or less ready for, with some minor adjustments, you will be able to have the first mover advantage. Right now, the first mover advantage is really essential. And I have a few examples that are really that are really fitting and explain how time and speed is essential. An example comes from my industry, that's the lubricant industry. The lubricant industry has seen a drastic decline in demand because of companies closing operations and so. But some companies have converted their production line into making hand disinfectant, hand sanitizer. And again, those who won were those that were able to do that within a week or two. Another example is car makers. So car makers have used their units, for instance, to make ventilators. So we have examples in the US with General Motors. We have example in Europe with SEAT. The important thing, again, is speed. General Motors, it took them 11 days to start producing ventilators in their units. And to SEAT, it took 7 days to actually adjust their Leon factory to produce ventilators. Other examples are that other car makers have used their 3D printing and their injection molds to produce face shields, again, for the healthcare sector. What is really important is that all of this has been really enabled by this sense of possibility and this immense energy, if you want, that some companies have put into thinking quickly and developing a new offering and leveraging on opportunities. Another aspect that is just as important as recovering revenue is rebuilding operations, because the pandemic has highlighted the vulnerabilities of the predominant supply chain model, which was based on centralized production facilities, on global suppliers, and on just-in-time deliveries. And the thing that is interesting to see is that the car industry is, again, a very good example, because the car industry is really an industry that builds their profit on just-on-time delivery. We all know that when we order a car, we have to wait for the car to come, and also stock, minimizing stock and so on. And they have been the industry that have suffered most from the pandemic crisis. In fact, there have been several car companies in Europe that were forced to stop production already for a couple of weeks, already in February, before the pandemic crisis hit Europe, because they couldn't get car parts from China, which was back then in lockdown. So there will be 3 elements that will be very important moving forward in order to build a stronger and more resilient supply chain structure. The first aspect is that this crisis is really accelerating regionalization. That means that it will be important to have suppliers in different regions in order to manage possible disruptions and reduce the impact of disruptions that can occur in specific geographies. And also, in that same sense, multi-sourcing. So not any longer relying on, because that is also what the vulnerability has been of some companies. They were relying on a single supplier for critical components, and that has really been a major drawback and a major disadvantage versus other competitors. Secondly, companies will need to reassess their make versus buy options. Again, having your production facilities in a certain continent and needing to ship those products in other regions, again, could become a problem, also because then, if the pandemic, like if a crisis like it happened this time, somehow occurs over a longer period of time in different geographies, this means that you will suffer from the crisis for the whole period of time. Like, assume that you instead have right now a production agreement, a toll blending agreement or a production agreement in China. Then your Chinese operations would have been already up and running, and you will be selling in China already now. And you would have been selling in China for nearly a month. But if you were, let's say, an Italian producer selling in China, then you would be blocked. You would be blocked when China had the crisis, and you would be blocked for the period Italy had the crisis, and then all of a sudden your crisis expands in time and in severity. Third, it will, another vulnerability that this crisis highlighted was that some companies had very, very little visibility across their supply chain, had not done a risk assessment exercise, and had not a risk mitigation plan in place. So what has become evident is that companies will need to build dedicated supply chain risk management functions that will work together with procurement and together with supply chain, that will really have that function to assess vulnerabilities across the whole supply chain and put risk mitigations plans in place. It is already mentioned, and I think we will hear much more about it as we will return to normal operations, that investors and stakeholders will assess the company also based on the risk, on their supply chain risk management plans. Just like a couple of years ago, we would have believed that it would be unrealistic to believe that investment decisions would be based on sustainability reports of companies, but sustainability entered the scene of investment in a very drastic way all over the globe, because we see also that US-based investors are requiring sustainability reports and sustainability plans. Risk management plans will also be an element, an important element in investment decisions. And in that sense, digital solutions again will play a key role. It will really be about tools, also because all of this needs to be done in the most cost-effective way, because all this potentially adds costs. We add inventory, we add complexity in supply chain. Hence, having the right tool will really be a key success factor, and digitalization will really play a very, very important role in this. What has already transpired from these first two slides is that it won't be only important what we do, but it will also be very important how we do it. This is something that has been called the Great Unfreezing. Basically, the pandemic has disclosed, has released new thinking really under this crisis situation. It has really unleashed creativity. It has unleashed also a different way of, a different approach to work. So bureaucracy has been replaced by lean, agile teams. There has been where decision-making has been delegated, and that has enabled to keep this sense of urgency, this speed, this sense of possibility, and also this, as I said, extreme creativity. And the key now will really be to institutionalize this kind of changes and make somehow rebuild, rethink our organizations and our leadership models to really learn from this experience and build on it. Because again, those who will be able to learn from this, to maintain the speed, to maintain the sense of possibility, will be the companies that will have a huge competitive advantage versus other actors. And in this sense, back to the creativity, this is obviously this crisis has caused a lot of damage. It's still causing a lot of damage, and we don't know even for how long that will impact our economy and our lives. However, this crisis also presents opportunities. So it is really paramount right now to look at the new reality that is emerging from this crisis, the behaviors and so on, and try to think how our business can leverage on this, how we can leverage on the opportunities that this new setup is presenting. Because we need to look at the dynamics in the market space, but also the dynamics in the competitor environment, because maybe maybe customers will prefer to buy local, for instance. And then maybe one customer that up to now was not accessible to us because they have a very good, strong relationship with a supplier, but the supplier is maybe located overseas. All of a sudden, that the customer is accessible to us. So we need to reflect about predict how the crisis is impacting decision-making. Consumer behaviors are also changing. Customer needs. Customers will maybe now start valuing things that were not so important before. And also a very, very important element is looking at policies and regulations. They will also have an important impact on purchasing behaviors. And I would like to make two examples on this. One example is electrical cars, because as you know, in Europe, electrical cars are subsidized to different extents in different countries. However, there are state incentives to buy electrical cars. And something that is extremely interesting is that in March in Europe, sales of cars dropped by approximately over 50%, 50-60% across the continent. However, sales of electrical cars grew by 17%. So electrical cars actually had their all-time high market share in Europe. And why is that? Definitely the incentives were an important aspect in making that decision, and also expecting more cost reductions in running electrical cars. So that is one interesting aspect. And another also incredibly interesting aspect that is about policies, about incentives, but it's also about consumer behaviors, is bicycles. So someone said that bicycles are the new toilet papers. In reality, bicycle sales have really grown dramatically in Europe and also in the United States. In the United States, bicycles are sold out in many states. And in Europe, we have seen many European cities that have expanded their cycle network because they want to encourage people that are now returning to work not to crowd public transportation to avoid a second wave of pandemics. So, as you can see, and the thing with bicycles has really been something really sudden, very sudden development that found everybody unprepared. So being able to predict, to predict behaviors, closely monitor any type of political debate in terms of incentives. Again, in Europe, the European Union is putting together this Green Deal, which are several initiatives to promote more environmentally friendly behaviors, and they will put in place a lot of incentives. So trying to link your business with that, trying to see how you can leverage on that in order to find new revenue streams or increase your existing revenue streams will really give you a gigantic competitor and competitive advantage. So now to summarize my part before we move on to Katie, winning in the new normal is possible. And that will be about focusing on primary revenue sources and identifying new revenue streams, rethink your supply chain risk management, keep a sense of urgency, and link to that, develop an agile business model to be able to really take decisions quickly and gain competitive advantage. And as we saw in several of these considerations, you will need to accelerate adoption of digital, artificial intelligence, and analytics. They will really be the pillars of a successful business model in the new normal. And with this, I leave the floor to Kate, because Katie will really explain with examples and with all of her experience how AI can support businesses.
Thank you very much, Valentina. So if you stop sharing your screen, I will pull mine up. Thank you. I love the bike being the new toilet paper. That's fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. I love that. And that's a perfect cue as well for me to talk about one of your final bullet points there, which is artificial intelligence. So as I mentioned in my brief introduction, I've written a book on the impact of artificial intelligence in business. The case studies there are a year old, but the material that I'm living and breathing every day through the all-party parliamentary group, through the work with clients, is as up to date as this morning. So I want to just start by us all being really clear what we mean by artificial intelligence. And I'm talking here not one technology, but a family of technologies that has its roots in data science, technology that's been around for 70 years, but technology which is now in what we call an AI summer. Because we've had 10 years of smartphone technology, we have all the incredible data, and we have cheap processing power, and therefore we have a lot of investment in the sector, and therefore thousands of technology disruptors to complement the work that some of the big brands are doing, the IBM Watson, Adobe Sensei, and others. And you can see here it falling into many different areas. Some you'll be familiar with, like our interactive AI, through to visual AI with computer vision, and where it overlaps with other technologies like augmented reality and so on. But we're really talking about a technology where what we hear, what we see is often indistinguishable from a human being. And that might be a phone call that we receive from an automated assistant to book a haircut, or to try and book an appointment with us to discuss our AI adoptability. So all different things like that. There are technologies which become ready, scientifically possible, but perhaps the market is not yet ready for them. And where AI has been for a few years now is in the peak at the top of this Gartner hype cycle, the peak of inflated expectation and hype and paranoia, a phase where, as we've seen for many years, there aren't the case studies of return on investment and proof points. And so people turn to Terminator, movies and Hollywood and so on, and talk about robot warfare, and some of which are true, but what we want to see in business is something that isn't quite there yet, which is a plateau of productivity. And where I found we were for the past year is the third phase along, where some businesses had deployed some AI and it wasn't quite what they expected. It fell into this trough of disillusionment. So a bank, for example, in Denmark used AI quite soon, and people were, staff, for example, weren't quite ready, and they were frightened, and they hadn't been communicated with properly, and the actual clients found it quite gimmicky. And so there are elements of AI that are not yet at scale, are not yet getting the traction that they deserve. But what I want to show you very shortly are some amazing examples of how AI is being deployed, either to give an increase in revenue or a decrease in costs, in the agile way that Valentina just outlined, for the fast movers and those who are innovative, who can see, what's coming. This chart shows you down the left-hand side the industry sector, and across the top the business function where they're using AI. So if we go along 3 to marketing and sales, and then drop down to almost the bottom, retailers like TGI Fridays and many others are using predictive analytics. Valentina just talked about that, predicting of behavior, and banks and retailers are using AI. And I'm describing AI here not as artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence. So they are able to take what might have been 4 quite homogenized, very broad personas of customers, and actually turn 4 million customers and give them a very personalized service. So say, for example, somebody coming into a restaurant, they're now able to predict with GDPR compliant data, with consent, they're able to say, Valentina is this age, she's married, she's got twin girls, she comes into my restaurant on a Thursday evening and she orders this, rather than saying female, certain age bracket. They can get very, very personalized. If we go up to the first category, they're telecoms, they're using AI more in their service operations. So they are predicting weather patterns and are saying, when the weather turns cold in 4 months' time, we need to be ready with 10,000 engineers in our vans to go out and repair the broadband lines. So there's lots and lots of different examples of how AI is being used across the board. But what you can see here, brands who have adopted it in their marketing strategy are predicting a 37% reduction in their costs and a 39% increase in their revenues, which is pretty powerful. So I'm just going to show you a few examples of it across different functions. So here we've got conversational AI, and that's allowing brands and businesses to use a digital assistant like this, or a messaging app, or a chatbot, for this really personalized communication with a customer. So in my book, I have a chapter on the paradox of personalization. So we're all thinking technology, artificial, depersonalized. No, we need to correct that. We're talking about human being with the insights from the AI, able to offer barrister, doctor, marketing professional. We're able in all different professions with the data that comes from the AI to offer our clients, our customers, a really, really personalized service, and to predict and to do all kinds of incredible things at scale, which our human brain simply cannot process or handle. A few examples of some of the tools that we can use. People.ai, we're talking here about tools like this, which can integrate in with your Salesforce, with your CRM, with your email, your project management package like Slack, and say to a salesperson or a whole thousands of people in a sales team, this is what you need to focus on, because we've analyzed it at scale and we can tell you which headline, which customers to focus in on, and how best to personalize that. Another tool here, Otter AI, which a lot of companies are starting to use now for personalizing, for recording, for searching, and saying, for example, after, let's say it's a 2-hour Zoom meeting and it's being recorded, and after it you're saying, you know, please transcribe that, please set up a follow-up meeting with Valentina, please send that recording around to everyone. All of that time that we have to manually still do. So AI for me is where, for example, software as a service, cloud-based tools have been for the last 5 to 10 years. It's that next layer of automation. It's going to reshape all tasks. It doesn't mean it's going to take away everyone's jobs, but everyone's job will be impacted because they will be using new tools, doing new things. And that's what we want to, in the consultancy work and the training that Valentina and I go in and do with companies, that's what we're focusing in on. We're helping them in that agile way. You can see some here that are falling behind, and others that are able, you know, to take advantage of this new thinking, these new tools, and this new way of doing business. And I'm involved in a number of projects at the moment in all different industry sectors with companies to take them forward and help them future-proof and be ahead of the curve. A few examples here. So this is one, Ageas in the insurance sector. And what they're doing in a very agile way is allowing their customers to submit a photograph as they have a car accident through their smartphone, and they are getting a decision in minutes based on their insurance claim. And that's made possible through the technology I talked about at the very beginning, through computer vision, through machine learning technology, which is looking at that digital photograph of the damaged car and quickly estimating the cost of that repair. In insurance, we're talking here about potential of 14 billion in new research, in new revenue that really is going to apply to this wider set of construction, architecture and engineering sector. We're talking the ability to predict and reduce costs, and overlapping here with Internet of Things, with sensors, and enabling them, you know, really to stay ahead. And that's a quite startling figure at the bottom there. 40% of those construction firms that do not embrace the kind of digital technologies and digitization that Valentina and I are discussing, you know, will within 10 years be out of business. I gave an example a few minutes ago. Here's TGI Fridays. I interviewed these guys for my book. Lots of smaller brands as well. very much B2B and B2C examples. They use tools like Amperity, and they pool all of this data, and for 4 million guests they're able to personalize, because the AI tool stitches all of that unstructured data together to enable them to offer that kind of service and that kind of personalization. Here's a restaurant in Japan, and this is exciting. Think of, as the businesses open up in a couple of months, they can use AI to predict how many customers are going to be dining in their restaurants, looking at weather, tourism data, and all kinds of other data up to 45 days into the future. It's been 95% accurate. It's tripled their productivity and increased their profits fivefold. And really importantly for the environment, you know, reducing food loss as well. And I think as we move into the next phases of our lockdown, some companies would really benefit from this hugely. I mentioned insurance, and actually in my book, one of the sort of areas of consensus that came out is that banking, insurance, and the law in the future could become one sector, and that is about risk mitigation. And you have a lot of law firms hiring accountants, companies like EY hiring lawyers, and it's all kind of falling into this big melting pot. But here you have a startup company raising a lot of money, and it's AI that helps track the lawyer's work and automate things for them. It works out what activities billable, how it should code it, fills it in for them. And I know, as I'm not a lawyer, but I've spent 30 years in marketing consultancies, and this was the bane of my life, having to do, you know, these kind of boring, mundane tasks like filling in a timesheet. So in a school environment, in the legal profession, taking away that paperwork and that boring task that can be routinized is that next layer of automation. Who can help you with this? This is a glance at some of these companies, certainly in the UK landscape. There are hundreds and thousands of these companies all over the world. And that's part of the problem and part of the opportunity. Valentina talked about the opportunity to take, you know, this pandemic and for companies to use new technology or innovate. For the companies using it, I have to be honest and say it's a little bit of a wild west. People don't always know who to turn to. The glue in between all of these companies is missing. And that's why people turn to IBM Watson, Adobe Sensei, and others. But there are many, many other companies out there who can steer you through this, who can look at these companies and do their due diligence on them and so on. But there are exciting tools out there for you to take advantage of. In marketing, for example, and you break down that into paid media or behavioral analytics, and there's 5, 10, 15 companies that you can go and talk to. Actually, with some of them, it's a freemium model. It's very affordable. Tools like Concurred, Phrasey, and many, many others. It's an exciting space, and as a business function, as a job function, we're seeing some good traction of people using AI in their sales and marketing. So I just want to finish off my last section. Valentina has given us some great insights about responding, being agile, getting our business prepared. I've just explained what AI is, how it's being used, some of the tools that are out there. And I think this next step is, well, what do I do next? You know, how do I actually prepare? And actually, this slide is quite reassuring. If you're of a certain age, I've already said I'm 53, and you know, you have to put aside comfort zone, put aside 30 years of experience, and be prepared to start afresh and say, new world, new skills, and so on. But this is actually quite reassuring, because these are the skills from the World Economic Forum that we need. These are skills I've had personally for 10 years, and I'm sure most of you in business have developed a lot of these as well. Maybe not called emotional intelligence 30 years ago or even 10, but they're not skills of saying, Katie, you've got to go and have a degree in data science. No, people need to take advantage of the capabilities of AI and work with partners like us, but that doesn't mean I have to be the data scientist. So I need to be able to do the things as you do that make us human, that the AI can't do currently. And that's really reassuring as well. So as far as your plan and your issues are concerned, I'm sharing with you here the scorecard for success from my book, which has just been translated into Chinese, Vietnamese, Russian, and Turkish, which is quite exciting. And Valentina and I and our partners, we work with companies around these kinds of areas where we're getting you to, for example, give yourself a score of 0 to 5 in each of these 10 areas. You will then have a score of up to 50. Anything below 20, you're still traditional. 20 to 35, you are transitioning. And 35 up to 50, you are starting to exploit the benefits of AI. And I'll pick off a couple of them now. So do you have the mindset that Valentina and I have been referring to? Do you have the buy-in of the board? 3 is really important. We're not saying go away, jump on the bandwagon and tactically deploy AI. No, this is about a business case. This is about a problem that can be solved. It's about number 4, experimenting, proofs of concept, proofs of value, collaborating interdepartmentally and with your supply chain and possibly even with your competitors. 6, do you have the right resources and talent in place? Are you going to outsource? Are you going to reskill? 7 and 1 and 2 go really closely together, but it's about culture. If you're a huge organization, maybe you need to be operating like a startup. Maybe you need a culture of entrepreneurship, which you can have even in a major organization that's 100 years old and has tens of thousands of people. You need to innovate. Number 10, you need the roadmap, but an area that's really close to my heart, and I mentioned the work I'm doing on the all-party parliamentary group. I'm also launching next month a project with schools where I bring a whole group of business people together for 1 hour each with 6 or 8 people, and we are helping schools close the skills gap because they're not being taught fully on the national curriculum, certainly not in the UK, what they need to have to thrive at college and university and ultimately give businesses what they need in the workplace. So this is about equality, access to an amazing education for everybody, which AI can facilitate, but also ethics, explainability, privacy, trust, and all those really, really important factors. So that is very, very close to my heart. So, have a think now, jot them down now, or when we've finished, spend 5 or 10 minutes thinking about your own action plan. 2 years down the line, part of a 5-year plan, but actually, what about the next 6 months? What new behaviors are you going to deploy? Are you going to have a watching brief on your competition? Based on what Katie and Valentina have said, are you going to go and research some tools and so on? So that's really my advice to you is, think about what we've said, share it with your teams and your business partners. We're happy to share a recording of this with you so that you can take it into your board meetings on Zoom over the coming weeks. And we'd be delighted to, help you if you have any requirements for training, for consultancy, for keynote speaking. We're doing a lot of that virtually as well as face-to-face when I'm allowed to get back on a plane and go back out there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And we are very happy for you all to go on to take your mute off, unmute yourself, that's the word I'm looking for. We will no longer record. We won't record the, I'll stop recording that